Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Launch Control Podcast. Today we've got a really special guest, and his name is McHale. He's the Director of Communications for a company called Rivian. And if you haven't heard of Rivian, they're a company in the electric vehicle space similar to Tesla that's producing pickup trucks and SUVs now. And in this podcast, we'll actually go in depth with him about the company's future, about his past, about what it takes to start an electric vehicle company, especially in such a competitive space, and all sorts of things. So it's a really interesting episode. Hope you guys enjoy. And without further ado, here's McHale. Hey, Michael, how's it going? Nice to have you on the show.
Fairly well, thanks a lot. Nice to see you. I'll speak to you anyway.
Yeah. So, excited to talk to you about your role at Rivian and really all the cool things you guys got in store. I've been seeing a lot of news articles and hearing a lot about you.
Yeah, we have been very busy, being very quiet for quite a while, and this year we decided it was time to take the covers off, and we did that in LA. We showed the world our new electric truck and electric SUV, and I think we stole the show. We were very happy with the way things went there, and people seem to really like it.
Yeah, I saw. I mean, it just was flooded with news articles after that show, and I think it's something really cool. I mean, it doesn't really seem like there's any other competitors in the space doing electric trucks or SUVs or anything like that.
Yeah, that's right. We had taken a long look at the market before we decided on exactly what we wanted to deliver. And if you look at the EV space, clearly lots of competitors are making sports cars, and that's just great. You know, that's fantastic. That EV is great for sports cars. You get all that torque and all that performance. That's really good, because what electric sports cars proved was that electric vehicles could go fast. If you remember, maybe 10 years ago, we thought electric vehicles were like golf carts.
Right.
But sports cars came along and they proved that vehicles could go fast, electric vehicles, and that's great. And so we thought, well, but they can do more. And so we looked at making electric vehicles that could go off-road as well as go fast. So that's what we did. We looked at the space, and nobody was really producing an electric vehicle that lived in that off-road, made to be used, made to get dirty space. And so we sat down, worked out how we could do that, and that's what we've delivered.
So how long ago did this start? I mean, it's been under wraps, it seems like. It doesn't just come about overnight.
Right. Well, yeah, so this company has been developing this particular product for over 3 or 4 years now, actually. The company's been in existence for more than that, since 2011 time. It has 600 employees. It's very difficult to keep 600 people quiet when they're so excited about what we're doing, but this isn't a small garage setup. We have quite a distributed business around the States. We have our engineering and headquarters in Plymouth, Michigan. We have our battery technology in Irvine, California. We have a connected car business in San Jose, California, and we have our manufacturing plant in Illinois. So we have quite a setup ready to go. So it's taken 4 or 5 years of good, solid planning to get to where we are now, and now we're just planning to put those final ideas into production.
Yeah, I think I read an article. You guys bought the Mitsubishi plant, the old Mitsubishi plant.
Yeah, that's right. We were looking at somewhere we could get a fairly quick setup going, and of course that plant was producing cars up until just a couple of years ago. And so has all the infrastructure there, all of the things you need to make vehicles ready in place. And we just need to make it now ready to make Rivian vehicles. But we were very happy with it. A very skilled workforce in town, and a town in Normal and Bloomington, Illinois, dedicated to making cars. So they know how to do it. They understand the process. And it's great to be back and revitalizing that town, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that saves a lot of hassle, too, when setting up a facility. You don't have to go through and develop, 90% of what's necessary. So that's nice.
That's right. And logistically really well spaced. It's right in the center of the country, so it serves both coasts really well, and has a great supply base around it that was there in its previous life, and so just ready to go again.
So how did you keep this all under wraps for 7 years now? It seems like I haven't heard of you guys until just recently. and it's everywhere now.
Yeah, so our company is run by founder and CEO RJ Scaringe. RJ is an automotive genius, in my opinion, and even though I work for him, I'm still allowed to say that. He's 35 years old and has an MIT PhD in automotive engineering. Really knows the space, and I think just as importantly, has brought a team of people around him who were prepared to do whatever it takes. So it's working nights, working weekends, working 7 days a week, working through birthdays and vacations and all of that stuff to get this product to the place it is now. And I think that's created this real sense of camaraderie. So everybody knew what we were doing. Nobody wanted to break the spell. So everybody stayed on side and put it over the line in LA, and then they could all finally breathe that sigh of relief when the car was out there and got the reaction that they knew it was going to get. So I think it was a moment that everybody built toward for a long time.
Yeah, I'm sure that was really special for you guys and your employees, is to finally be able to talk about it.
Yeah, the engineering team, of course, testing for so long. The design team had done such great work on design that they wanted customer feedback, and we'd get one or two people into the office and they'd see it and they'd like it, and that felt good. But the big test, of course, is when you put it on the world stage and to see what reaction is, and reaction was incredibly strong.
Yeah, I noticed. I mean, most of the news articles, I think every single one I read was pretty positive. I mean, of course, you'll have people that say one thing about the design and other people love it. And I think that's something really interesting we should talk about, is the design's really futuristic, in my opinion, and looks pretty interesting. How did you guys come up with that?
Well, yeah, and that's really interesting. I spent some time working in design a long time ago in the automotive industry, and it's an interesting process that you go through, especially in the electric space, because everything in that vehicle above the wheels is blank space. It's not like an old internal combustion engine setup where you have 2 ton of powertrain up and above you at the front of the cab. It isn't like that. There's nothing there because it's all battery pack. It's a skateboard. If your listeners think of it like 4 wheels and a battery pack, the engineers hate when I say that, but it's visually true. You have these 4 wheels, and in between those 4 wheels, you have this thin sandwich of battery pack. And so everything above that is free space. And so what that means is you can design anything to go above that space. And so you could make it really futuristic. You could make it look like a rocket ship or a cruise liner or anything you wanted. But customers want vehicles to look a certain way. So customers understand what an SUV looks like. And so when they look at profile and proportion, they say, okay, that's an SUV. I understand what that is. And same when they look at a pickup truck, they say, okay, it has a bed and a front cab, and that's a pickup truck. So we didn't want to move too much away from those proportions, but at the same time, make it look a little bit different. And so when we saw it in the studio, it looked very much like a pickup truck. But when we put it next to some of the pickup trucks that are out on the market today, man, it made those cars look 100 years old. The proportions are still there, but it has moved the whole design language forward by 2 generations in the pickup space and the SUV space too. And I think one thing we've really been clever on too is making use of the space that the proportions had required us to keep. So in other words, it has a hood, but under that hood there's no engine. And so under that hood, we can now make storage space. So you can lift the hood on a Rivian R1T or an R1S, and there is a terrific amount of storage space there. It's powered. And so that will become, for most of the time, the place where you put your sports bag, or even more than that. It's fairly big space. And then underneath the cab, just behind the cab and underneath where the mechanicals would usually go, there's a huge pass-through storage area. We call it our gear tunnel. You can put shortboards in there, strollers, golf bags, and it's accessible from either side of the vehicle because of that space I'm talking about. So while these cars are designed to remind people that they are SUVs or trucks, they're also designed for great usability, and then also to take the language on a little bit further and to say, okay, this is a truck, but this is the truck of the immediate tomorrow and not the truck of 2 generations ago.
Yeah, it's interesting because there hasn't been a whole lot of development or any new technologies come out for pickup trucks. I mean, the general design language has been pretty similar, and you've got the cab in the front and the bed in
Right.
the back.
Yeah.
And if for listeners that may not have seen the truck, what he's talking about, the gear tunnel, there's a huge opening uh, that is accessible in front of the rear tires. So it's actually kind of in between the bed and the cabin, so behind the rear passengers, and it's a huge space. I mean, you could fit bag of golf clubs in there, I think. Uh, I
Yeah.
haven't seen pictures of the under the hood, but I'm guessing that's like a car's trunk.
Yep. We call it a frunk. It's a front trunk, and I'm sure there's a better word than front, but that's what everybody keeps saying. And yeah, there is so much space in this vehicle. And we looked at pickup trucks, and they're great. And design has become a little bit conservative in that the manufacturers have hit a really winning formula, and nobody wants to change from it, which is understandable. And so design has stayed in a certain way for a while. But when you look at the way people use trucks, there was just the bed. And if you wanted somewhere to put your bag, you had to throw it in the rear seat if you had the crew cab. And that's really, not the best use of a vehicle. So with all of this extra space now, we have that in place, and its usability is terrific.
Yeah, I mean it also helps because if you have bags that you don't want to get wet or something like that, and you've got a full car in a regular truck, you'd have to throw it in the pickup, but in the bed. But if you've got a front trunk, then just throw it in there, and you don't have any wet bags or luggage or anything like that.
And it's all lockable, securable too. Because the other thing
Interesting.
we haven't talked about yet is performance of the vehicle on and off road. We can talk about that if you like.
Yeah, and I think from another manufacturer's point of view, it seems like the pickup truck market has actually really taken off the performance market. And so, did that play a factor in you guys deciding to go into this market, or?
Well, we decided to develop electric vehicles a while back, and we wanted to put them on a fairly big platform so you get great range. So our vehicles can get over 400 miles range with the right battery pack configuration, which is pretty impressive. Okay, so yeah, when we decided to create an electric vehicle, the first thing we thought about was battery range and size. So we wanted to produce a vehicle that was, fairly big. These are fairly big vehicles in order to get the best range. And our vehicles will produce, the Rivian R1T and the R1S will produce over 400 miles range with the right battery pack. But what that, of course, also gives you is a lot of power and instantaneous torque. And so we looked at the configuration again and said, well, look, if we have this huge battery pack and we mate it to quad motors, which means a motor, not at each corner, but a motor for each wheel, they're actually inboard, which gives you great balance. But a motor for each wheel, we can get over 800 horsepower from this vehicle. So then right, then you're producing a vehicle that's got 800 horsepower and 400 miles range. And okay, so we've got those two things. And because the motors are inboard, that gives us really good wheel articulation because it has long drive shafts. That gives us really good off-road capability too. And because of the quad motors, we get individual wheel control. So, okay, well, now we have an off-road vehicle that can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, 800 horsepower with 400 miles range. Well, that's quite a winning combination.
So yeah, so the vehicle seems like it kind of does it all. It can go off road. It can provide a lot of storage space. Does it have a good towing capability as well?
Yeah, so towing is up to 1,100 pounds. It's incredible numbers. Because electricity gives you that great torque, the towing numbers are pretty impressive. Now, of course, you lose a little bit on range when you're towing, as you would do on fuel economy if you're towing. So if you're towing a regular piece of equipment, a trailer or something like that for normal towing in normal use conditions, you might lose 30% of your range.
Okay, so I mean, it's not anything crazy though. You still got several hundred miles that you can tow.
Right. That's right. And the recharge is so fast that we were talking about this yesterday. Somebody wanted to drive from Philadelphia to Detroit for some reason. And I live in Philadelphia and work in Detroit, but it wasn't me. And we were talking about, okay, you wake up in the morning, you get 400 miles range, you drive for 400 miles, and then you can recharge the 200 miles that you need in 25 minutes. So you can add 200 miles charge in 25 minutes on a fast charge. So you get 600 miles of driving with a 25-minute break. That's fairly good going.
And is that just with like a normal charger, or do you have something similar to Tesla's supercharging setup?
It's the fast charging system. It's not Tesla's supercharging system, which is a different system, but it's the DC fast charge system. But a home charge system, a regular charge system, will get you a full charge overnight. And the fast charge system will get you 80% of charge. We don't like to talk percentages because the battery is so big, it's like filling a huge pool. But you can get 200 miles range in 25 to 30 minutes.
Wow, that's incredible. How would that actually work? Do you have a cord that you keep in the car and you go and you plug it in somewhere, or?
Well, the cord usually comes with the charging system. And so you just pull up to the charging system and plug in and go and get some.
Okay. So the systems at like different colleges and things like that.
Yeah. So there's a set of standard charging systems that are being created across the country through Electrify America, which will be the most prevalent and common charging system. And Tesla, obviously, everyone knows about now because they're first to game. But in the next 2 years, Electrify America will put thousands of these chargers across the states, so it won't be an issue at all.
Okay. And is it similar to a gas station where they charge for it, or how does that work?
Yeah, you'll pay, a few dollars for that charge, like anything else, but it's a more efficient system. I don't know the exact pricing to fill up, to be honest, but it's a more efficient and effective system than filling it with gasoline.
Okay, yeah, and I think with Tesla, when they first came out with the supercharger network, they were offering it for free, and then I think they realized that they were going to lose a lot of money if they did that. So they're not even offering that for free anymore. I mean, it makes sense. You got to pay for electricity anyways. So
Right.
So what is the weight of something like this? I mean, it's got a huge range. It's a big vehicle, a lot of batteries. What does something like this weigh?
Yeah, this is not a light vehicle. So this is a 5,900, 6,000 pound vehicle, but you don't feel it because the torque is so terrific and the balance of the car is so well proportioned that you really don't feel the weight.
Well, and the weight seems like it's like all down low, so you'd have a pretty good center of gravity.
All below the wheels. So if you think about driving the vehicle, the weight of all the mechanicals all below the top of the wheels. So the handling of the vehicle is terrific. So yeah, when you add the handling onto the range and the acceleration and the articulation, and of course everything on the vehicle is water sealed, so you can drive this vehicle in 3 feet of water and the battery pack can be completely submerged. And so that's another attribute that the vehicle has. It's quite a package,
Yeah, you don't need a snorkel anymore to go off-roading in the water.
Yeah.
So have you taken any of these the test vehicles off-roading yet?
I have driven a couple of the mules, and they are astonishingly good. I'll be honest with you. And I must say, I've been in the business a long time, and this is easily the most exciting thing I have ever been part of.
That sounds awesome. I mean, the Raptor market is really huge, and they have a hard time even keeping those on a lot. So I think there's definitely a market for these high performance vehicles. And I've noticed especially with the big trucks is that you can get really high in price, but they don't have much going on in terms of interior or tech. I mean, some of them are getting like lane assist and things like that now, but they're never really on the forefront of that. And I noticed with you guys, I mean, the cabin's beautiful. It looks like you guys really, try to make this the whole package where you've got tech, you've got, a capable vehicle, and you have the interior. Yeah. I mean, can you talk a little bit about, the interior qualities and some of the processes that went into that?
Yeah. So the space that Rivian vehicles will occupy is a premium, high quality, but not necessarily overwrought space, in that the Rivian pickup truck might appeal to somebody who's always wanted a pickup truck, but didn't particularly feel drawn to the higher testosterone, big and brawny play that the other makers have. And our pickup truck is much more accessible, much more invitational. You'll find over time that Rivian will be a good brand for you to partner with. We'll be a responsible, um, positive part of your life. And I think that when you reflect the interior of the vehicle and you think about it in the space of, let's say, a Range Rover or a Porsche Cayenne, or that kind of interior that's more premium, but maybe slightly more hard wearing than you might find in other vehicles. So some vehicles over time started off being very hard wearing and very much built for use, but have become more premium and less about use over time. Our vehicle will always be premium and will feel nice and beautifully designed and the top levels of quality, but you'll be able to wipe down the interior after you've used it. So if you've got dirty boots in there for the day, that's okay, because the materials we'll use in the cabin will allow you to wipe down every day.
Yeah, I think that's really important. There's a lot of these really high-end luxury SUVs coming out now, like the Lamborghini Urus and the Bentley Bentayga and the Rolls-Royce Cullinan, and they're designed. They have a lot of off-roading capability, but you don't want to get the interior dirty on the lamb's wool carpet, for example.
That's exactly right. So we have a thing called invitational versus presentational. And a lot of brands out there, and they're fine, that's fine. They do a great job, and it's not disrespecting those brands at all. They're presentational brands. They're for looking at and for being admired in as you drive down the street. That's great. Nothing wrong with that. Our brand is more invitational. It's about inviting you to go out for the day. So if you see a Rivian in your driveway, you should be inspired to take it out for the day, into the mountains, get it dirty, use all of its off-road capability, bring it home at night, wash down that interior, and start your day again tomorrow.
So I'm looking at the truck and the SUV here. Are they built on the same platforms, just with a different, I guess, overhead piece?
Yeah, more or less. The wheelbase is slightly different, and that talks to our business capability, if you like. Over time, we have this ability to offer the skateboard platform to other industries or other car makers who might want to build a platform on top of our skateboard. And we'll do that as long as it doesn't touch on our brand. So if a mobility company wanted to produce a highly connected, highly capable, great range vehicle in their space, we can do that for them. But as long as it doesn't touch the Rivian brand space, we'll always protect what Rivian is, but we can offer that technology to other makers.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that a lot of the companies that are in these electric vehicle spaces are technology companies as well. I mean, Tesla sells a lot of their battery technology to people completely outside of the automotive space. And there's another company, Rimac. They're producing, the high performance supercar electric cars, but they really, their majority of their business is selling components to companies like Mercedes or to anybody that needs battery tech.
Right. It's a specialization thing. So we've become a specialized EV manufacturer, which includes connectivity and includes battery manufacture and battery assembly, which we do ourselves, by the way. And so that's our core competence. And you may be a car company that doesn't want to develop that in your own space, or you may not even be a car company. You may be a coffee company, and you want a vehicle to drive around, San Francisco delivering coffee for you. And we can provide that service too, because we have this great connectivity platform, this great cloud computing platform on the vehicle, and also the underpinnings of the vehicle you need. Now, if you are that coffee company, we may de-spec the vehicle because you won't need the off-roading capability. It's an R12 truck. But right. you see the point. You see where we're going with that.
Yeah, so you guys make all of the battery tech in-house?
Yeah, the batteries are standard production batteries. They're 21700 batteries. But the way we assemble them is unique. And the way we develop the architecture to cool them, which is very important, is unique too. We assemble our batteries in a very dense way, in a very durable and rigid way. And then we have these heating and cooling plates that run top and bottom of the batteries that can individually cool various areas of the battery pack. If we can sense back at base that your battery is overheating or is too cold for optimum performance, or we know you're going somewhere that's about to get hot or cold, we can preempt that and preheat or pre-cool the batteries to keep them running at optimum level. And that's part of the range capability of the vehicle. Range is one challenge, but range with temperature variation is another.
Okay, and so I guess the batteries themselves, if they're kept at a certain operating temperature, it increases the range then.
That's right. You want to keep them around ambient for as long as you can.
And I've seen a lot of news articles that talk about, AI technology with your batteries and things like that. Is this kind of what you're talking about? An algorithm that smartly scans and sees what batteries need improvement, or is that something else?
No, that's a similar thing. The vehicle over time will learn your habits. So it will learn if you are a fast charger and you like to fully charge every day, and it will create a window of battery charge for you, because we never really want the batteries to be fully depleted or fully charged, because that tends to hurt the ions over time. And if we know that you're a fast charging guy, we'll give you that window of charge. And if we know you're a trickle charge person that comes home every night and dutifully trickle charges their batteries, we'll give you that window of charge too. So it's about battery maintenance, and our software engineers are very clever at that, and they have these great solutions to keep the batteries running for a long time.
So we talked about some of the interior specs, and I mean, this car is loaded with technology and AI batteries and all those kinds of things you see in the headlines. Can you talk a little bit about what providing an electric truck has given you guys the ability to add in terms of tech features? Do you like lane assist? Do you have any aspirations to do automatic driving with these cars? Any things like that?
Yeah, so we will deliver these cars with level 3 autonomy. And level 3 means hands off, but stay engaged. So you can be behind the wheel, there will be a wheel, but you can let the car take care of most of the driving for you as long as you're still around. Level 4 and 5 does get really hard, and I think people are starting to now be a bit more transparent about how hard that is. Level 5 is like landing on the moon. It's hard stuff. But the level 3, I think, that most people will get most use of most of the time will be in a Rivian at launch.
And is that what is out in, I guess, Tesla's right now?
Tesla, I can't speak to that. That's their thing, but I think that they have some level 3 capability in the vehicle now, possibly. But you'd have to speak to that.
And so that's just basically where you can have hands off, and the vehicle will stay in the lanes. And
yeah, stay in lane, get you home, but you have to stay engaged. It's not yet time to take a nap in a level 3.
Yeah, we've seen a few articles of what happens when people do that. So are you guys only going to be targeting the truck and SUV market, or do you have plans to kind of expand into other things in the future?
Yeah, we do. The beauty about the electric drive platform is that you can alter the wheelbase fairly simply, and it's just a matter of reconfiguring the battery packs. So in the future, we can imagine more Rivian options available to you. It depends on who you talk to. If you listen to the press, but the press is speculating about rally-inspired versions of Rivian sort of sports coupes in the future. That's not my speculation. That's media speculation. But I think it's fun to see that conversation going on around our brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to, I think, what Ford has done with the Raptor brand. I think it'd be interesting to see if you guys come out with some performance-specific, models or anything like that.
Yeah, I think the basis of our brand will always be adventure, and adventure means different things to different people. Sometimes it can mean, hitting a trailhead and going fishing for the day. Other times it can mean, fairly serious off-roading up the side of a mountain. Other times it can mean, heading out to the beach for the day. So whatever type of vehicle a Rivian offers you will be based around fulfilling your day's adventures.
Yeah, I mean, I've even seen there's a truck racing series that races with Indy cars, and it's called, I think, Stadium Super Trucks, and they have just huge jumps, and they race on the actual racetrack. So maybe we'll see what a Rivian Rivian super trucks here in the future.
I'm looking forward to the first time that SEMA, which is the Specialty Equipment Manufacturers
Right.
Association event, I'm looking for the first SEMA where Rivian vehicles are on sale and see what people do with them, because I think that's going to be a fascinating space.
Hopefully we'll see some wide bodies and all sorts of things.
People can get very creative. That's for sure.
So what exactly is your role at Rivian? I know we talked, and I think your title is Director of Communications, but you said you've done a lot in your time, manufacturing, technology, all sorts of things.
Yeah, I work in communications now, which is basically talking to the media and folks like yourselves to tell people our story, which I really enjoy and I think is my natural home. I enjoy being in this role a lot. But I started a long time ago when I was very young in engineering, and I was a tool maker actually in my first few years, which was making the big heavy presses that stamp out the sides of the vehicle or smaller components of the vehicle, those big presses you see in factories.
Right, for like the sheet metal and
metal stuff, yeah. I did that for a few years, and then, staying college kids, I went back to college and got my engineering degree and moved into design for a few years and worked in vehicle design, specifically on exterior design, bumpers, mirrors, that kind of stuff on vehicles. Worked with the design folks on that. Did that for a few years, and then moved into more of a corporate costing environment where I would visit manufacturers who were selling vehicles to us, selling components to us, and look at the cost of manufacture, how we could make it cheaper. Did we need all 5 bolts? Could we take it down to 4 bolts and so on? It was a cost down job, and that was a lot of fun too. And I used to work in a shared office with the marketing team. And the marketing team would come back with really cool T-shirts. I was at Land Rover at the time. And they would come back from events with really cool T-shirts. And I said, well, how do you get those T-shirts? And they said, well, you have to be in marketing. I said, right then. So I left engineering and moved into marketing. And I've worked in corporate affairs and government affairs and industry relations for all the last 20 years. But in between times, I worked in manufacturing, in line balancing and various stuff in the manufacturing plant too. So what that's done, I think, is given me a really good appreciation of how hard everybody has to work to produce a car. It's a very complicated process with lots of people doing lots of great work. And off the end of the line comes a vehicle that people hopefully want to buy. But that doesn't happen by accident. That starts in research 8 years before, and then through pre-production planning and costing, all the way through design and manufacture to production. It's a fascinating industry to me, still is after all these years, and I'm really happy to be on the end of it, where I can tell people about the great stuff we do.
Yeah, I think people really take for granted when we hop in our cars just all that went into developing and designing and engineering and, paying for bringing this vehicle to market, and something we get to enjoy, but we don't really think about much.
Well, the biggest change, I think, in the industry in the time I've been around is the amount of legislative requirement. So most of everything on your vehicle has to meet some kind of legislative rule. It could be the size of your mirrors. The size of your mirrors have to comply to a regulation because there's a minimum size of mirror, and quite right too. But what that means, of course, is that the mirror designers are then restricted to what they can do with mirror design, because they can only make it so big and so wide, or so small and so narrow, before it breaks the regulation. So that's why sometimes you see cars get to look a little bit samey. And that's sometimes it's because of regulation, which means that the front of the vehicle has to pass certain crash test criteria and so on. And the other thing is packaging, because people want a vehicle to look and feel a certain way when they get into it. Headroom, leg room, width, shoulder room, elbow room, all that stuff. So once you put in the customer requirements, what they're looking for, and then you factor in the legislative stuff, what the government needs to make a vehicle safe and right for the road, that's a fairly restricted package. And then the designers get to go to work to try and make something unique around that space. It's quite a challenge. And of course, it has to come in on cost too. So you can design a vehicle to look beautiful, For the same money, you can design one to look not very nice. We've seen both examples of that. But sometimes designing a vehicle to have certain features costs money. So, when review cameras were mandated, that's great. It's good for safety, but there's a $200 cost in that somebody in the company has to factor in and add to the price of the vehicle and hope we can still make a profit.
Right, and try to hide it in the back of the design somehow and make it not just stick out like a sore thumb.
That's exactly right. All of that stuff has to come into play, and in the end, the consumer has to be willing to accept it the way you've solved that problem. And it's a fascinating space.
Yeah, and so has your role at Rivian always been director of communications, or did you start somewhere else?
Oh, I've been there. I joined in 2018, so I'm fairly late into the team. They have been going as a company for 9 years, so they've been toiling away for a long time. And prior to this, I was at Subaru, and prior to that, Land Rover and BMW, and I was at Mini actually when we launched the Mini Cooper here a long time ago. So I've had a fair amount of experience of launching vehicles, which I think was the appeal of this role, was to come in and help them launch it and bring us to market. So that's my role. And yes, like I say, in the US, I've worked for BMW, Mini, Land Rover, Subaru, and now Rivian.
So how did you first learn about them? How did you get in touch with them? What made you interested to work with them? Well, especially being so quiet, they were under wraps for so long.
I had known about them because they had purchased the Mitsubishi factory in Normal, and that, was a significant buy. So that sort of impressed me. And this industry is quite close and quite connected. So I was talking to somebody and they said, here's someone you should speak to. And suddenly I'm talking to somebody from Rivian. And within 5 minutes of being on that call, I just knew this is where I wanted to be. They had such enthusiasm and vigor and energy and drive and clarity around what they wanted to do. There was no way I didn't want to be part of it. So that meant working in Michigan 3 days a week. That's perfectly fine by me. And that's what I go and do if I'm not needed anywhere else. And I jumped on with them earlier this year. And it's so far it's been terrific.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you really love the company you work for. That's always important, I think.
Yeah, it's a really easy company to love. The people in there have such honest, genuine commitment and belief in what they're doing that it's I would say almost impossible not to get carried away, and I mean that in a good way, not to get carried along by that energy, because it's infectious and it comes from the top. The guy who runs the company, RJ Scaringe, is not only a genius of what he does, he inspires people to want to help his company succeed. And I think that's another kind of genius. And I think he does it unconsciously because he's just that guy. So every day we all want to go to work for this guy. And it's terrific to work for somebody who has that belief in what he's doing and is quite happy to share that belief with you. It's a great moment in life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important for all businesses in general, is just to kind of let that enthusiasm trickle down, and it's infectious. You're right. I mean, it gets the people actually do a better job if they can see that you're interested in what you do.
That's right. And we all believe in the same thing. And I tell this very quick story. I've not been there very long, and if you stay late at Rivian, they feed you, which is nice, So we're eating pizza one night, and I'm talking to one guy, and I said, how many nights have you done this? And been here till 10 o'clock. And he said, maybe 5 times a month for 9 years. I'm like, oh, okay. You've done a lot of these late nights. Yes, sir. And that's just what they do, and nobody complains because it's what we do.
Yeah, and I think, if you're interested in what you do, it doesn't really become work at that point. You're passionate about it. You want to stay late and finish whatever you're working on, and
that's right.
It's nice that they were able to cultivate that in more of a corporate environment.
It is, and it really doesn't feel like work. It feels like what we get together every day to do.
So do you think that contributed to letting this, what seems like a small company, compete in such a competitive and costly bracket?
Yeah, I think belief in what you do and belief in your people is core to everything, because even when we go to talk to investors, and they look in the eyes of RJ Scaringe, who owns the company or founder and CEO of the company, of course, he's going to believe in what he does. But when they look around the table and they see that same belief, and it's not, I wouldn't paint it in any way as any kind of zealotry. It's a confident belief in what we're doing, because we understand what we're doing, and we know what we're doing. When the investors see, not just RJ, but his first line of 10 people have that same belief, and then the next line of 10 people have the same belief, and so on and so on. And when they walk around the company, they can feel it in every part of the company. I think that's what convinces them, aside from everything else, that we will succeed in what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's super important, and maybe I'll have to talk to him in the future. But it'd be interesting to hear kind of the story of how, I don't know if you know this, how Rivian got started from, if they started from another company, or I wouldn't even.
Yeah, it's I know, right? You start to think, well, I've wasted my life, because he started this company straight out of his PhD, because this is what he knew he always wanted to do, and he was clearly cut out to be that person from the beginning, and so has had people around him who've been willing to give him the time and space and investment money to bring this to fruition. This isn't something that happens overnight. This is depending on the scale, this is a 3-year or 9-year project, depending on how you look at it. And he has generated enough belief around him for people to give him time to deliver what he can do. And he's just doing that right now. So this is sort of an interesting moment in time that, he's bringing to market the thing that he promised his people he would do a decade ago, and he's doing it.
Well, and if he started 10 years ago, I don't think, was Tesla launched 10 years ago yet?
Yeah, maybe. They were maybe in that space. I think they maybe just started with the Roadster.
Yeah, with the Elise-based Roadster.
Yeah, the Elise space, exactly right. Yeah, that's the Lotus space thing, exactly right. So maybe, and I think the whole idea of EVs was just starting, and people were understanding what they were capable of. But what RJ did 2 or 3 times is say, you know what, that they're capable of more than this. So this is a one-dimensional approach that company A had done, and then company B comes along with a similar one-dimensional approach, and RJ wanted to put 3 dimensions into Rivian. And so that's what's taken him his passion to do over the last few years, is to put those 3 dimensions in. And I think when you see a Rivian in the flesh, you'll understand that they are fully formed, fully dimensional vehicles, and that's really tribute to his vision and dedication, since the beginning.
Yeah, I mean the vehicles came out, and you had 2 fully working, I guess you'd call them mules, test vehicles, but they came out and they looked like finished vehicles, before we even saw concepts or anything. So
yeah, that's testament again to his attention to detail. He could have come with half and delivered half of that, and people would have said, "Oh, that's great," but he didn't. He delivered all of it, and so people say that's amazing. And that's the difference between, I'm not going to say a winner and a loser. That's the difference between someone who succeeds at what they're doing and someone who gets by at what they're doing. RJ will succeed because in the way he delivered those cars at LA, epitomizes and embodies everything about his approach to business.
yeah, I find it so interesting that hasn't really been. I mean, Tesla released the Model X, but there hasn't been an EV pickup truck that I know of. And even the Model X, I think, isn't really geared towards the traditional SUV market.
No, it's a different space. And, people were so entrenched in the idea that, it's a fairly conservative buyer base in the pickup market. And that's true. But there are people, we did our research before I came in. The company did its research and talked to people on the coasts, particularly in sort of, more progressive towns, and said, okay, what do you do the weekend? We like to snowboard, we like to ski, we like to surf, we like to take the dogs out, or the trail bikes, or whatever it is. What vehicles do you drive? And oftentimes they drove a conventional truck, but they also drove maybe a Tesla or maybe something a little bit more progressive. And, the question is, well, why don't you have just one car that does both? And of course, that car didn't exist. And so that's when the light starts to go on and you say, well, if we could make that car, would you buy it? And the answer was so clearly yes that we realized we'd found our space.
And it seems like in other parts of the country and world, I mean, you're going to have a little bit of an effort educating people as to the benefits. I think EV electric vehicles get a bad rep a little bit, especially from the automotive community, just because people don't really know they can be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's okay. When gasoline powered vehicles came along, there was a disbelief that you could create a whole network of having to provide liquid everywhere in the country that people would have to put in their vehicles. And in 1908, people thought it was impossible. And it's a bit like that change from steam to gas power, move from gas to electric. There is always a space in my heart for internal combustion engines. I love the way they sound. I love the sound of a good exhaust. I love a Hemi-powered thing rolling. They sound great, and they fulfilled a purpose, and that was their time. But the next generation's time will be about electricity, because it's really the only way to move people. And I think pickup now is around 3 to 5% of the vehicle market. That's fine. Once people drive a 300, 400 mile range vehicle, electric vehicle, they will never go back. So every time someone converts to electric, they won't go back. So it's inexorable in a way. It won't reverse, and the market will reach a tipping point, in the next 10 or 20 years, whatever it will be, a tipping point where electric vehicles will overtake sales of gasoline vehicles at new. And then that will happen in the used market, and then the whole infrastructure will build from there. I think it's undeniable at this point that will happen. It's just a matter of when.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what it does for these vintage vehicles. I mean, some of them are getting really expensive, like Ferraris are selling at auction for millions. In my opinion, I think it's going to make it go up, just because we're going to see it's less supply, and there's still going to be a demand, in my opinion, for those internal combustion engines, just for the reasons you said, the sounds and things like that.
I'm always conflicted about the price of vintage vehicles. I watch some of the car auction stuff, and they're going for crazy money. And in a way, I don't like it, because it puts those vehicles out of the range of ordinary people. But at the same time, I like the fact that they're worth enough to preserve, because the more value is in those vehicles, the more you can be certain those vehicles will stay around. So I'm always conflicted about that, what's happening with vintage vehicles.
Right, and at a certain point, I mean, it's a work of art. It's like buying a Picasso, right? Especially the older Ferraris that are going for so much. They're just pieces of art.
Yeah. A 250 is not in my future.
Hey, you never know. Maybe Rivian will do really well, and you'll get 250.
That would have to be an exponential really well for that to happen for me. But nevertheless, I like the fact that they exist, and I like the fact they're worth enough money to preserve.
What got you originally into vehicles, into cars?
So I'm from the UK, and I lived in Birmingham, UK, which is the home of the car industry there, much like Detroit here. And it's what you did, you worked in the Midlands, and you were of a certain social bracket, and you went into the car industry. It's what you did. And so I was 15 years old, and I started work at what was British Leyland at the time, which ran Rover and MG and Land Rover and Mini as 4 separate brands under the British Leyland Group. And then my career went from there. But it was just part of your DNA. It was the car industry was everything.
Yeah, it seems like over in Europe they have a lot more focus on motorsports and cars and things like that, just growing up, than even here in the U.S. I mean, you've got a much larger F1 presence there, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. There was always, the RSC, what became the WRC rally, was always on mainstream TV on a Sunday afternoon, and you'd watch that, and there would always be a local race going by. And I think it's true in this country too, but it's a different kind of racing here, And NASCAR was dominant for so long that it sort of killed off sponsorship because for racing to take off, you have to have money behind it, and the sponsors really only want to spend their money on where the big numbers are. And NASCAR dominated for so long, not so much now. And it's you can see other types of racing. Formula E is interesting. What's happening there, and the global rallycross racing that happens here too. I think there's plenty of racing happens here, but it was people were more amenable to racing in the woods back in Europe. I think is true. If you found a patch of grass with a few trees in it, you'd throw a few cars around it and see it.
Yeah, we don't do that as much here anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So you talked about Formula E. Do you guys look at some of what they're doing when you are, looking at your tech? Does anything from the Formula E developments apply to you guys as a EV company?
In terms of tech, I think it's always great to see where the highest amount of development is. But we're starting on our path here, and Formula E has been around 5 or 6 years now, and I think it's great to see what they're doing because it continues to bring awareness to the EV space. And I think the more manufacturers talk about EVs, the more the customer will start to understand that it's the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Formula E has been an interesting series to watch because when it first came out, people really didn't like it, and it's definitely improved though. Like they at first they had to have 2 different cars, and I don't know if they're still doing that, but I know that they're trying to improve the tech so that you don't have to switch cars mid-race. So
yeah, I know they were talking about you can follow the battery management strategy online, and there's that kind of, and there's no doubt sound is such a big part of our lives that when the sound goes away, it does change things for sure. But the precision and the technology behind the Formula E vehicles is fascinating in itself. And I don't think it'll ever sound as good as Formula One, but I'm not sure Formula One sounds as good as it used to either. So that's
yeah, there's a lot of contention there as well with the new restrictions and everything they have on those vehicles.
Right.
I've found it interesting. I've always wondered if people like electric vehicle manufacturers could do something about, I don't know, making the sound of the like in more sports car oriented applications, but making the sound of the electric motors louder or something, because some of those can sound like superchargers if you really take sound deadening out.
It's a weird philosophy, isn't it? Because there are companies around that do sound enhancements inside the vehicle. So they'll enhance the sound of the. They'll basically put a speaker system on the exhaust system and pipe it back into the car to make the car sound like it's louder and
yeah. The i8 did that.
Yeah, the i8. Audi did it, of course, and Volkswagen do it too. It's trying to think of the term for it. It's like a little esophagus thing that vibrates. But anyway, so you can do it, but I think once it stops being organic, it changes things. Once it's being forced,
right?
It changes things. Now, of course, exhaust notes are always tuned, but it's different because at least the pressure inside the exhaust that creates the note was real.
Yeah, that's why I'm more interested in seeing if maybe electric companies could, EV companies could figure out a way to make the real sound of the electric motors come out. And I know a lot of those are pretty quiet, but you could get.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I think we'll just have to become used to appreciating different things about racing in the future.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to see where it's going, and you really have. And I'm a car enthusiast myself, and you have a lot in the car enthusiast community that kind of are holding on a little bit. And I think there's going to be a place for both vehicles for quite a while. I think it'd be nice if people appreciated the EV side of things a little bit too. I mean, the first time I drove a Model X, and huge SUV, right? And someone said put it in ludicrous mode, and that thing, is a blast. As I'm sure your vehicles are going to 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It's still, pretty close to as fun, if not just as fun. So
right. I've been lucky enough to go to the Goodwood racing, to the Revival and to Festival a couple of times, and the Goodwood Revival racing which is racing cars from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, is just phenomenal. It is one of the best things you'll ever do. If you ever get the chance, go and do it. Mortgage your house, sell your car, go and do it.
It's on my bucket list.
Yeah, and it's one of those events where it gives you hope or solace in that even if we are moving into a different age now, there will always be a way to experience those cars racing, because they're worth a lot of money, but people are still prepared to put them out there, and they actually get dinged up. It's incredible. There's $1 million 250 out there that is seriously hard racing against a breadbasket or something else on the circuit, and it's a joy to watch. And I think that even if we do move into a new era of electric vehicle racing, there will always be space for those vintage sounds.
Yeah, I mean, we still have the vehicles from the 40s racing. They're gonna be around for quite a while, I think.
That's right. Well, 3D printing solves everything,
And do you guys use a lot of 3D printing in the Rivian production at all?
I don't know the answer to that. Our production system is still being set up, but I would not imagine so. The 3D printing still takes a while. But so in terms of prototyping, you do it for that. But in terms of day-to-day manufacture, things have to be a little quicker still. At the very high end, low production stuff, I would imagine 3D printing is quite useful. But in mass production, it's not there yet for us. I would not think.
So what kind of materials are you guys working with on the vehicle? I mean, have you played with carbon fiber? Is it traditional metal, aluminum?
Yeah, we're using everything that's available. So the good thing about RJ, our founder and CEO, is that he is an automotive production expert. So he doesn't want to recreate anything that is already being done very well. There are some manufacturers in the world who are recreating the wheel just because they can. And there's no need to in some areas. So we're taking what the industry is very good at, which is in the main manufacturing, and applying that to Rivian. So it's the lean manufacturing method that people know and love. We're using tried and tested technology. We're using aluminium panels, a steel frame. We do have Kevlar in our battery protection plates that sit underneath the vehicle. So you could basically shoot a bullet at it and it's going to be okay. But we know that people need to know that the vehicles are trusted and trustworthy. And of course, we have to pass all of those government regulations I told you about before. So we're building a vehicle that we know works, and the technology we're adding to it is where we're taking the vehicle forward. But in terms of manufacturing, it will be manufactured as vehicles are being manufactured today in the main.
So you're talking about the government regulations, and I think from a car enthusiast standpoint, we know that there's a lot of vehicles that they have over in Europe that we don't get in the U.S. or things like BMW's engines in Europe, or you have another 70 horsepower. Do you guys find any troubles trying to get regulations passed for the U.S. with an electric vehicle, or is it a different process?
Well, I think it's all developing now. It's a very complicated and deep subject, so I don't want to get too much into it. But the whole space of autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles, which are kind of separate, but they're running on twin paths, if you like, that whole space is under a lot of scrutiny now, and a lot of work is being done to make sure that not just for safety, but in terms of compatibility and repair and all of those things that take up the time of a car company are all being worked through now. And there are a lot of people hours being put into making sure that we have a viable structure in place to accept electric vehicles, on the road in the next 5 to 10 years. What do charging stations look like? How do fire departments deal with an electric vehicle crash? All of those things have to be taken care of. But it's been worked through because it's what needs to happen. In terms of other markets, the world is continuing to move towards a general level of commonality in terms of vehicle testing and crash testing and so on. That's to the better. Once all world markets have the same crash test, it becomes easier to make a car that can suit every market. Sometimes there are local market differences, but generally it's a better thing when testing is common between countries.
Right, yeah, you don't have to put in so many R&D dollars just to, crash a car 100 times for different countries.
Right, that's right. It's better when it's more common.
Speaking of crash testing, as an electric vehicle company, do you guys have to run through the same set of procedures for crash testing and, I don't know, flipping testing or?
Yeah, so the test procedures are the test results are the same. The test requirements are the same. Whatever is around the occupant, it's about occupant protection, right? So you have to make sure that your vehicle can run into a barrier at a certain speed, and the occupant inside the vehicle is not, injured or not impinged by that crash. And so it's the same for electric vehicles as it is for any other vehicle. The one advantage of electric vehicles is there isn't a ton and a half of steel engine or iron engine in front of you that's going to push through into the cabin. So that helps in terms of crash design, that we don't have to worry about that big block of metal being in front of you. But of course, we have to create crumple zones and airbag protection and all the things that everybody else has to do.
So yeah, that's what I've seen is, there's a huge cavity sort of in the front of the car that can act as a much bigger crumple zone than in traditional gasoline front powered cars.
Right.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you guys are doing quite a bit of innovation and engineering there, and
yeah, we are having a blast. It's quite a good time to be in our space.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to what the future holds. I think we're going to see a lot more electric vehicle companies coming out, and especially some of the bigger ones taking it a little bit more seriously. It's interesting that it takes the small companies really to pave the way before the big companies will even take a look at it.
I think we're in an interesting space because, you're probably not old enough to remember, but in the 90s, the idea was there would only be 6 car companies left because economies of scale were so great that there was only room for 6 car companies. And that's being proven untrue now because with electric drive, those great barriers to production, which is basically engine design and development, have gone away. And so that means that smaller companies can come into the market. And I think that we're at a space now where there's a general trust of new brands. People expect things to work. You probably didn't know the brand that made your phone 10 years ago, but your phone works every day. You probably didn't, you might not even know who makes your TV, but your TV always works. There's this general acceptance that things work these days. So that level of trust, I think, has risen amongst the buying public. And so when a new brand like Rivian comes along, there is already this understanding that, okay, it's a new car company. I don't know who they are, but I have a confidence in them because everything in my life works. So whereas in the 60s and 70s, maybe your dad or your grandfather or your grandmother would say, I'm only buying from, Herbert, whatever brand, because they always work for me. Those other ones don't work. Or they're unsafe or unreliable. That has all gone away. There's a general competence to the world now, I think, and that's helping new brands come along.
Do you think that has to do with some of the regulations they're making sure that these people are taken care of? I mean, you've got things like lemon laws and warranties and everything from these automobile manufacturers.
Yeah, all that helps. Competition, of course, is the great leveler, and you don't survive in business very long if you're not providing good customer service. So that always helps too. Social media really helps customers because, you're 4 bad reviews away from no one going to watch your movie, right? First thing I did today was click on Rotten Tomatoes.
Right. I mean, it's interesting piece of capitalism is that traditionally, I mean, it makes a better quality product. At least I've seen that.
Well, that's right. So it drives you in that way. The regulation helps too. But it was always mainly about reliability, things breaking down and production processes and the understanding of design and the implications of design in production processes has become so well developed. And quality levels are so high now. It's 1 in 1,000 thing breaks, you get disappointed. was when I was at, doing manufacturing engineering 30 years ago. If 1 in 10 failed, you felt lucky. It's a different world now. Everything works, man.
Well, and I think with electric vehicles, I mean, with a combustion engine, you have so many different components that can break, and it seems like, even though they're complicated pieces of machinery, it seems like they've gotten simpler, right? You have the battery, you have the motor, you've got some wires, but and then a lot of computer components. It seems like,
well, moving parts is always difficult. Moving parts is always a problem because things that move create friction, and friction creates heat, and heat is the enemy of all things. We're moving to a solid state system where things don't move, or at least don't move at the physical level anymore, and that creates a more reliable environment. Anything that spins, twists, rotates, jumps up and down eventually wears out.
So, I mean, in terms of Rivian, in terms of the vehicles, if you were to buy one, what sort of maintenance are you expecting? Do you have to service the motors or batteries? What sort of maintenance do you expect on a vehicle like that?
Well, one of the advantages, another of our advantages, is over-the-air maintenance. So we will be able to monitor and repair to a certain extent your battery system over the air. We can provide updates to the vehicle. We can flash, if you like, your vehicle over the air, so you can wake up in the morning. There's a Rivian 2.0 in your driveway with a different, display system if you want it. And so all of that stuff means that there will be fewer times you have to visit the service shop. Of course, sometimes you'll have to take a car in for service. If you bend it, break it, something wears out or doesn't work properly, you'll have to take it in. We'll have a network of service partners that you will go to, because you don't want to drive. Our aim in our first couple of years is to sell 40,000 Rivians over 2 years, and that's not a lot in global scale at all. But that means you don't want to have to drive 100 miles to go to get your vehicle serviced. So we will have authorized, trained service partners local to you that will provide all of your service needs for you, for the ones that we're not providing over the air.
Oh, interesting. So do you think that these service partners are, they're going to have to be able to work on electric motors, and that's not a traditional mechanic. So you guys are actually going to be providing training and courses for mechanics, or how does that work?
Yeah, so electric vehicles are interesting, right? Because you still have that combination of mechanics, the mechanics of a vehicle, things that go up and down and wear out, like suspension systems. They're still that's a function of physics. And then you have the electric side of the business, which is much more difficult to see in terms of a battery cell. And then the whole connectivity of the vehicle too, which is, IT software. So those three things are coming together, and over time, the amount of mechanics in the vehicle is reducing, and the amount of invisible, if you like, software connectivity is increasing. That's what's happening to the vehicle. I think the role of the technician changes over time too. It's even now, the role of a technician is not much about getting your hands dirty. A lot of it is diagnostics, and that will continue. And then things it becomes a much more of an intellectual operation as a diagnostic technician than it was, 40 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the way that it's all kind of changing to be serviced remotely, and it's not the same as me having to fix my car in my garage,
You think about it like your phone, your phone will update over the air and you'll get 2.0. But if the screen cracks or your battery fails, you have to take it into the shop. It's that same space.
Yeah. So do you guys, speaking of, fixing things, and do you guys have warranties that you provide? How does that system work? Do you pay Rivian to get fixes, or?
Yeah, the cars will be fully covered by warranty. These things take a while to develop and fine print and all those things that the good lawyers work on. But you can, like I said to you, the market is incredibly competitive. So you can be sure the only way we survive is by having a marketplace warranty that is equivalent or better than anybody else's. So that, of course, will be in place at the time you can buy a Rivian. You can, of course, put $1,000 down to buy a Rivian today. That gets you to the front of the line. And www.rivian.com. and you put your $1,000 in. It's your money, not mine. We don't touch it. It stays in a trust. And it just means we know you. We know who you are. We can get to talk to you. We can send you a nice T-shirt, and we can start the conversation. It helps us too, because we know if you're buying a Rivian, you're interested in a Rivian, we can see your kind of profile, and it helps us understand, people like you maybe would also like one.
So you're doing the whole online ordering process?
Yes.
You guys won't have like a dealership network per se?
No, in most markets we will do direct sales. It may be the current online system is for ordering, is for deposits, but we'll do direct sales through a variety of physical stores. Where we are required to by law, we'll have a dealership partner in those markets that require that. But in the main, we'll try to do direct sales from Rivian in a physical way to you.
Okay, that's really similar to what Tesla's doing, but they had, I don't remember which states it were, but some of the states said they weren't allowed to sell there anymore.
Yeah, right.
So you're trying to partner with some of the physical dealers in situations like those states that have those anti-consumer laws, in my opinion. But
say, but okay.
Yeah, but so then I don't think we talked about cost. What does one of these things cost?
That's a great question. The base vehicle will cost, after federal taxes, $61,500 for the truck and $65,000 for the SUV.
Well, that's pretty. Do you have options, a list of options that comes with, or?
We haven't spec'd those out yet, and we will for sure try to sell you one higher grade if you come and talk to us, but we will make that vehicle available.
Okay, so is it things like, upgrades? Would it be like an extended battery life, or do they all kind of have the same platform?
There are 3 battery sizes, 135, 185. I'm sorry. Wow, that's just gone from my head. Incredible. But there are 3 battery sizes available, so obviously price depends on that, and then various capabilities in the vehicle and various functionality and trim levels and so on. But the base vehicle starts at $61,500.
That's pretty cheap if you.
Yeah, 105, 135, and 185. Sorry, I forgot that.
It's pretty cheap if you consider. I've looked at a lot of the interior shots, and I recommend anyone listening to check out the interior. It's pretty beautiful. It seems like really high quality. Seems like some of the competitors would be in the class of Range Rover.
Yes.
And for the price, you're talking about a fully loaded Acura SUV. So
I think it's a very competitive price, and like I say, we'll quite happily talk to you about one that's higher up the price ladder if you like. But that 61,000 is an incredible buy. So
another question that I was interested to talk about it. Do you think these will ever be used as like a work vehicle, a work truck vehicle, like for gardeners or construction workers, anything like that?
Yeah, I think for regular. So when you say gardeners, for sure. This is a great vehicle for somebody who we have actually had interest from municipalities who would like zero emission pickups for their state parks or national parks or local parks, which is a great thing. So for gardeners, sure, that stuff. If you're looking, if you're in an F350, double bed, Super Duty, that's not what we are. If you're a heavy industry construction worker loading up girders in the back of the vehicle every day, then that's not us. But for regular, if you're a landscape gardener working in town and you'd like to roll around town in something a little less impactful, then a Rivian R1T is for you.
So it's not like a super heavy duty, right. It's geared. It's trying to be a solid all-arounder that can. It has a lot of things that it can do. So it's interesting that you guys are able to accomplish that.
That's right.
Well, awesome. I have a couple more questions for you, but I think we're getting near the end of my list of things I wanted to talk about. Right. It sounds like you're pretty much an automotive enthusiast. You went to Goodwood. You love racing, things like that. Do you have a dream car for yourself?
If you could drop an E-Type to my house, that would be just great. I'd maybe even take the electric conversion that's out there now. But yeah, if you could drop an early '60s E-Type in pale blue to my house, that would be just fine.
So yeah, you got the perfect one picked out already for when Rivian takes off.
Yeah, right.
And just for any listeners, I guess, interested in getting in the automotive space or working with marketing with these kind of companies, do you have any advice for someone that's maybe just starting out or someone that's looking to transition up the ladder a little bit?
Yeah, I think always stay aware of the industry you're in. Make it a hobby, and if it's not a hobby, then maybe this isn't the work for you. If you find yourself reading about cars in your spare time, then maybe the car space is for you. So if you're in a marketing company and this is your hobby, try to find a marketing company that's associated with the car industry, and you'll gravitate towards it. But don't make it a forced fit. I see so many people come into the industry and say, I'm going to get into cars, I'm going to read magazines, I'm going to do all this stuff, and they don't do it. And so they don't provide as much value to the business because they're just not as plugged in. Now, having said that, I think if you're too much of an enthusiast, if you're too much of a Kool-Aid drinker, that can be a detriment too. You have to be able to see what's good and bad about your industry too. So if you're it's like being my son's a huge Eagles fan and can never see anything wrong with the players. And sometimes there's something wrong with the players, and you have to be able to see it. So it's being interested in the space and having an awareness for the space and a general understanding of the space without being too much of a Kool-Aid drinker. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, having a level head about, look at things logically as opposed to, we all have brands and marks that we love and would love to work for and be a part of, but also understanding that there's flaws and weaknesses that could be improved.
Well, there's an understanding in the industry, and I say this to all my journalist friends out there, that every journalist would bankrupt a company within, 3 months because they would build the Homer vehicle, that had everything on it. And that's the same with sports. I'm a big soccer fan, and I would bankrupt my team within 6 months because I would buy every player out there. And then sometimes you have to run a car company as a business too. So you have to balance out that enthusiasm and need and wish to produce the best vehicle possible with plenty of companies have gone bankrupt trying to produce the best vehicle in the world, and those companies are no use to anybody. So it's about viability too. So it's that sense of keep your feet on the ground, keep yourselves in business, and make the best car you can.
Yeah, I think even some of the big players get that wrong sometimes. We see prototypes and designs come out that are nothing like the car that ends up being produced.
Yeah, you also see it the other way too. You look at a car and you think, man, for $50 more, they could have made a decent product. And somebody in the wrong department saved $50, and then has to discount the car by $500 to sell it. And then it's false economy. So, for a nicer grade of leather or better stitching or whatever it would be, that vehicle would have been just a bit more appealing. So sometimes the wrong people win, and that's true in any business.
It seems like you'd have to kind of, find a perfect balance point. It's like a balancing act, and I think that's why it's so interesting that you guys were able to get a price starting at $61,000 with everything included in the vehicle.
Well, yeah. Well, when you say everything, most things, we'll charge you for a few more things. But yes, I think it's important for us. We're starting out here. We want to make sure that people understand we're providing them with good value. We're providing them with a very nice premium vehicle, but we don't expect them to pay over the odds for it. They should pay the right price for the right vehicle.
Yeah, I think it's at the upper end of traditional vehicles, but it's not anywhere near like a high class luxury SUV cost, and I think that'll really open the market up a little bit because when Tesla's the Model S's are so expensive, $100,000 when they're launched, and it didn't really provide that easy accessibility for the everyday person, right? And now we're getting closer with 60, and I think really once the technology improves and everything gets cheaper, and we have $30,000 fully electric vehicles, we'll see a lot more people starting to switch over. And it's interesting interesting time that we're in.
It really is. This is a great chat. Thank you so much for giving me time
Yeah,
on your show.
glad to have you on, Michael. Thanks so much. I loved learning about it.
Okay, hope we can speak again.
Thanks everyone for joining us on our first ever Launch Control podcast. I'm really excited to start this series and hopefully talk to a bunch of other people in the automotive space. I'm trying to talk to car manufacturers and race car drivers and other media people like in YouTube, things like that. Just hopefully provide a podcast that people like listening to, because I was looking for an automotive podcast to just talk about all these different things and kind of went behind the scenes a little bit more than what's out there. There's a lot of car reviews that do a great job, and I was trying to look for something a little bit more than that. So hopefully you guys found that in this podcast, and stay tuned for the next one. I'm hopefully going to be providing at least one of these a month. If I can get more guests than that, that'd be great. If anybody knows of any guests or anybody that might be interested in coming on the podcast, feel free to reach out. We've got a website that's launchcontrolpc.com, and we've also got Instagram and Twitter, so follow us on social media, share it with your friends, give this podcast a like, thumbs up, whatever medium you're watching it on, feel free to share it. Love the support. Thanks everybody.